Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 1 of Tron Uprising called Beck's Beginning. Now this is the show that was the winner of my You Choose What Show I Review contest. Now before I get into the review, I do have to explain something to you guys. The deal with the contest was if you chose a half an hour show, I would review 2 episodes of it. Basically, the prize was 1 hour of my time spent reviewing. The thing is, though, the first 2 episodes, well, the first episode of the show is pretty much standalone. The second episode of the show is part 1 of a 2-part episode. And I really don't feel like I could have really given that review that episode a fair shake if I didn't watch part 2 of it. But ultimately, that would have led to me having to watch 3 episodes of the show. Now, there was a problem. Basically, we had the same problem the last time around that I did that. And then I specified that if this happened again, that I just have to disqualify that entry. Now, unfortunately, I didn't think to reiterate that when I spelled out the rules to this particular contest, and I didn't check to see if that was the situation before I sent out a tweet saying that Tron Uprising was the winner of the contest. So, seeing as how I kind of dropped the ball on that one a little bit, I decided, alright, I'll compromise. I'll watch the first episode of the show, and if I'm into it, then alright, I'll just watch the additional 2 episodes, no problem. If I'm feeling just sort of about it, then it's just going to be the 1 episode that gets reviewed. And at the end of the day, I was sort of left, not really super jazzed to watch anymore. So I'm afraid that it's just going to be the 1 episode for the review. Sorry guys, but well, I've already explained the situation, so let's just dive right into it. Now, one thing I should say before I continue on any further is that I have not seen Tron Legacy. It's not that I have anything against the movie, it's just I never really got around to seeing it. Now, I've seen the original Tron quite a few times when I was a kid. We had a copy of it in the house I grew up with, and I always enjoyed the film, and I remember the basics of it pretty well. Now, one thing I will give Tron Uprising credit for is that if you're familiar with only the original movie from the 80s, well, you're going to see plenty of things that you're familiar with. The little spaceship things that folks fly around in, with their rather bizarre little piloting controls. Of course, the light bikes and all of that. It's definitely the Tron universe. And, for someone who's coming into Tron, this new modern Tron, visually, that was welcome. I really did appreciate that. And, of course, you once again have Bruce Boxleitner reprising his role as Tron, which, you certainly can't go wrong with that. And, of course, Bruce Boxleitner is a guy with a pretty decent history of science fiction, of course, from Babylon 5 and some other things as well. So, he's somebody that I'm a fan of. I even have an autographed picture of him that I got off the guy who played Garibaldi on Babylon 5, as a matter of fact. But anyway, let's continue on. Now, as I said, this is my first time really coming into anything Tron since the last time I watched the original 80s movie sometime when I was maybe in junior high school. Possibly not even that recently. So it's been a while. And here's really kind of my biggest gripe with this episode is that while I'm given enough information that I can follow along with what's happening, I just really spent most of the time feeling like I'd been thrown into the deep end of the pool. And now that's not always a bad thing in storytelling. A lot of good movies and TV shows and books have done that and done it successfully. Here, it feels like that's what they're going for, but they're just not able to pull it off. Basically, for about the first third of the episode, I felt like, okay, I just understand what's going on. Now, it's always in the back of my head, if I had seen Tron Legacy, would this be a lot more clear as to what's happening to me? And that was ultimately just kind of a distraction. When you're starting something like this, you really do want, of course, it to be recognizable to people who may only really be familiar with Tron Legacy, But you also don't want people who maybe like me are just sort of checking out something Tron for the first time in years, or other people who've never seen anything Tron. I just really felt confused coming in the door. Now, as the episode wore on, it did seem to gel a little bit more, and I was able to basically follow the story. Of course, I understood who was who and what was what by the end, but well, all right. I've made my point here. Now, I will give the show some credit here. The music that they use is really, really enjoyable. The action scenes are certainly very reminiscent of what we've seen familiar with in Tron, and because it's animation, they can definitely get a little bit more crazy than what I certainly remember seeing back in the 80s. Not that they didn't try, and not that it wasn't fun, but they were only really able to do what human actors could realistically do. Tron had some really amazing special effects, but that was one area where it wasn't the flash. Well, let's just say that wasn't the flashiest part of the movie and leave it at that. And we also part of Beck, that's our main character's motivation, is his friend gets murdered by the thugs of Clue, the evil general dude. Okay, that's all well and good, but the fact is that we get to know Bodhi for all of about 30 seconds before he dies. So we have no real time to become attached to him as a character, or even to any real reason to care all that much when he does die or get derezzed or whatever. He's really just there as a plot device rather than as a character, and that's a big, big detriment to any story. Now, just let me, yeah. And another part of it is, and this is a lot of exposition is dropped on us, and to some degree, this is of course necessary in a first episode. You really do have to explain to people what's going on, but so much of it is stuff that it really feels like should have been show, don't tell. And one other complaint is, if I'm remembering correctly, the fight that between Beck and Paige. Well, that was all well and good, but I actually had to go and look up what Paige's name was. I think it got said once, maybe in the course of the episode, and if it was, I kind of missed it. So she's obviously going to be an important character. I think it just, who was who could have been made a little bit more clear. Now, I did like the scene at the garage where Beck's friends are talking, and one of them, Zed, sort of brings up the idea that Tron might be doing more harm than good. He's getting the bad guys stirred up, and they're starting to take it out on the locals. And, Zed's actually raising a perfectly valid point. On the other hand, this is the whole eternal question of freedom versus security, and Zed's the guy who seems to be willing to trade his freedom for some security. Although in this case, getting security kind of counts as not getting murdered by the crazy soldier dudes. So, what can you do? But I do also have to give the credit. The idea that the bad guys are going to go around and basically grab people off the street and force them into gladiatorial games to the death, that's some pretty serious villainy there. It certainly makes me as a viewer want to see the bad guy stopped. It certainly, really does give the hero serious motivation to give their all to put a stop to this. But it's also the kind of question of, well, why would the bad guys do this? Now, sure, you want to scare people enough that they will obey you. But, it was classic Niccolò Machiavelli's advice. You should inspire fear in people, but you should not inspire hatred. Because hatred makes people willing to sacrifice themselves, or basically to do things that will take risks to have you taken out. Of course, The Prince was actually most likely written as a piece of satire, given that Machiavelli was an ardent defender of republicanism, and that's the Republican form of government, not the American political party, just so that we're 100% clear. But anyway, that's that's certainly far beside the actual point we're trying to make here. Now, the ultimate reveal that the guy that captures Beck is really Tron. Now, that's reasonably well done, but about halfway through their little chat, I had put it together. So, good try there, but I don't think that quite could have been. I think that could have been handled a little bit better. It could have been done in such a way that it would have been more surprising. On the other hand, if you just sort of recognize Bruce Boxleitner's voice. But anyway, at the end of the day, this is something of a hard episode for me to review. I just feel from not having seen the movie, and I actually went and did a little bit of reading about this series, and apparently there was a video game and a comic book that all sort of tie into all of this and explain a lot more of what's going on in detail. I just really feel like there's so much part of the story that I'm just missing. Now, I understand that Uprising is meant to be a prequel to Tron Legacy. It's sort of meant to explain how they get from the original movie to the sequel. But still, I just really felt confused and lost a lot of the time, and that's never good. Now, I certainly can't complain, as I said, about the music or the action, and there's absolutely no reason to complain about the cast. You've got folks like Elijah Wood, Lance Henriksen, Bruce Boxleitner, and even some somewhat unconventional choices like Paul Rubens and Mandy Moore. But, again, all really good folks who can deliver good performances. But at the end of the day, I just walked away from this episode feeling, as I said, confused. And honestly, I'm not really all that jazzed to watch any more of the show. Now, I'm not going to sit there and say that it's a bad show. I really honestly just don't feel as if I have enough information on the wider Tron universe that's all tied into this to really give a fair judgment. I've certainly heard from my friends who've seen it that Tron Legacy is maybe not a perfect movie, but still a pretty entertaining one. So, at the end of the day, I'd say if you've seen Tron Legacy, you might want to give this show a chance. If you're not really all that familiar with the Tron universe, well, you're rolling the dice. Let's put it that way. And yeah, that's basically all I really have to say about the show. As always, folks, please comment, rate, and subscribe, and of course, take care and have a good one.